What is up, guys? Thank you so much for being here. So today we're talking about a really unique gimbal that I think fills a void in the market. Zhiyun did send me this gimbal for free to review, but the video is not sponsored. They didn't pay me, and so they don't have any input on what I can or can't say. So the gimbal is the Zhiyun or Zhiyun, depending on how you say it, which, to be honest, neither of those are probably the proper way to say it. But anyways, it's the Zhiyun Cinepeer Weebill 3E, not to be confused with the Weebill 3S. My understanding is that Cinepeer is kind of like the Zhiyun, I guess, budget brand, kind of like the way that if you're familiar with Aperture lights, they also sell Amaran lights as kind of their budget brand, but not budget as in low quality. They still remain high quality. They just might be missing a few of the bells and whistles. So first off, I'm gonna go ahead and talk about some of the specs and compare those specs to some of the other popular gimbals, specifically the Weebill 3S and the DJI RS3, because I personally already own that one. And then I'll talk about my actual experience using it and how I think it holds up and if I think it actually got the job done. And then towards the end of the video, we'll talk about price and who should actually consider buying it. So going over just some of the most important basic specs, the Cinepeer 3E weighs 2.31 pounds and has a payload of 6.6 pounds. And it also has a battery life of 16 hours. It takes 2 hours to fully recharge. Now, I've never owned the Weebill 3S. That gimbal weighs about 2.32 pounds, which is just a smidge more, and it has the same payload of 6.6 pounds. It also takes 2 hours to fully recharge, but for some reason that one only has a battery life of 11.5 hours. As for the DJI RS3, I don't remember the official weight, but I went ahead and weighed both of these on my scales just to see the difference. Just the way they're configured right here, and this guy weighed about 6 ounces more, while still maintaining the same load capacity of 6.6 pounds. The battery life, it's 12 hours on this guy and 2.5 hours to fully recharge. Alright, so let's talk about some of those features that this gimbal's missing, and then we'll talk about the features that it does include, because to be honest, for me, it includes everything that I would be looking for in a gimbal and that you would actually need. So looking at the RS3 and some of the features it has an actual touchscreen here. You can kind of scroll through the menu and tap things, versus on this guy, you would just use the buttons, which honestly isn't difficult to do at all. So this battery doesn't last as long like we talked about, but it is removable. So you could potentially spend more money and then just buy more batteries, because the grip is the battery, like on most of these things. That way you don't have to worry about running out of time. But to be honest, I've never come close to running out of battery on either of these, even when I was shooting all day. At the point that I'm at right now, I don't see any situation where I would need more than 12 hours of battery life. You could use this thing for a couple days, and I've done that several times. I mean, honestly, even a long weekend, I'm gonna use it a couple hours here, a couple hours there, and you're good. And so like a lot of these features, they're nice to have, and for a very small percentage of people, it's something that you'll probably take advantage of, but I don't think it's something that the average person's gonna really need. The RS3 also has auto locking, which that is something that I actually do like. If you wanna turn the gimbal on and off, well, you would need to lock each one of these. You know, grab this lock, go like that, and then grab this lock. So now the thing's not moving around. And so that way when you're moving from location to location, your gimbal's not just flopping around because the motors are off. It's all locked into place, and you can carry it or put it on the side of your backpack, which I do. And so this one, obviously you're still gonna manually lock certain ones and unlock certain ones when you're actually doing the balancing. But once it is balanced, every time you push the power button, it'll just automatically close those with the camera on there. And then when you're ready to shoot, you hit the power button and it goes right back into position, saves you those maybe minute or less. And then another little convenient feature that I really enjoy, it has this little wheel that allows you to be more precise. That takes kind of one of those steps of balancing and makes it a little bit easier because it's more precise that way. And I'm not going to get into every single feature. You know, this also has more attachment points to kind of build it out. The Weebill 3S is kind of an in-between. It doesn't have as many features as this guy, doesn't have as many ports, but it still has more ports and features than this one. This one has a port for camera controls, so that way you can control, record, and certain things from the actual buttons of the gimbal. But then the Weebill 3S has one additional port that allows you to spend additional money to buy a little motor. That way if you're using a manual control lens, it gives you that capability to control the manual focus from the gimbal. And so this one doesn't have that additional port. But again, that's something that's on the RS3 and I've never used it because all my lenses are autofocus, or if I do want a manual focus, I'll set the manual focus on the camera and then move in because I just don't want my gimbal to be heavier with more moving parts. So for me, it's just not something that I need. But then the Weebill 3S also includes a light. So right here where this one is just a piece of plastic, it's because it's basically the same body as the Weebill 3S, but they just removed where the light would be. To be honest, from a lot of the people I've seen review the Weebill 3S, they've said that they've never used this light because it's kind of gimmicky. I mean, it's still, I guess, a nice to have. Also, the Weebill 3S has the option to buy it in like a combo where it comes with the wrist support and the extra handle. That way, if you're doing low shots or just shooting all day, it can kind of make it a little bit more comfortable. This one doesn't have that option. You could still just buy those wrist and extra grip separately and still attach it to this. You just can't buy it as a bundle. Now let's talk about the features that it does include, because I believe it has everything that you kind of have to have on a gimbal, that I look for at least. It has this attachment for the base and it kind of just swings right off. It's just nice because this not only works as a tripod base that allows you to just kind of put it down wherever, obviously it also extends the grip. Most gimbals include this nowadays. You can close it down and it gives you a lot more to hold on to have more control. And then of course it has the individual locks to be able to lock certain ones while you're balancing others instead of having them all loose while you're trying to balance one particular motor. It has all the same button layout as the Weebill 3S, so the controls in that sense are the exact same as the Weebill 3S, and they all work well. I like having the little wheel to scroll through the menu, and then you can actually click the wheel in as the button to select, and then you just kind of go back with the menu button. It's all the same shooting modes that you have on the Weebill 3S. Pan, follow. If you're familiar with any gimbal, it pretty much has all the same modes, including the vortexing and all that. And then on the front, you have a customizable wheel and a button. I think this is more of a need than some of those other things that we talked about, because it's nice being able to use this wheel for different things. Some people want to use this wheel for the roll, or some people want to use this to kind of tilt it up and down. And then the button / trigger on the front, you can tap twice to kind of recenter, although this one doesn't really drift away that often. I feel like this one, if I've been doing other movements, I need to use that recentering button more often. With this guy, out of habit, every time I wanted a straight shot, I would hit that recentering, but it was already in position. So that was kind of nice. And then one feature that it has in common with the Weebill 3S that the RS3 actually doesn't have is the capability to just take this plate off. There's a little button towards the end, but you slide it and then you hit that button. This little plate just pops right off. You literally just turn it around because it has this other end piece basically, and you can put it back on. Of course, you have to hit the button again. Now you can take vertical video. You don't even really have to rebalance it that much, at least not when I was doing it. It's just a matter of kind of doing the left to right one more time. So that's one of the features from the Weebill 3S that's a little bit more necessary, unlike the light and some of the other stuff that this one still includes. Now, as for my personal experience actually using the thing, I took it to an old silver mining town with a buddy. We got some cool shots there, and to be honest, it did everything that it needed to do. I haven't had any problems whatsoever. And then I spent an entire day kind of doing a few different tests. I went to a cool bridge and I just did some plain walking. Obviously, I expected that to do well, and it did. And the gimbal motors kind of get put in a tough position. Whether it's too much stress or weight or just angle, it'll start to shake. Like the motors kind of start to freak out for a moment. And sometimes the whole thing if it gets bad enough, will even just kind of like shut itself off, and then your camera's just dangling. Sometimes it'll just kind of shake a little, start to tremble, and then go away. So I wanted to make sure that when full on sprinting that it wasn't gonna do that, because I'm stomping my feet, swinging my arms, only holding it with one hand. We didn't have any issues. Again, you're gonna see that sprinting in the footage, but there wasn't any trembling, there wasn't any powering off. And then I decided to go to the front of our Capitol building to kind of go up the stairs to show off how smooth the footage is, but also just to make sure that the gimbal doesn't start freaking out when you're using it at an angle. Went up those stairs, no issues whatsoever. And I was doing all this with my full frame camera that I'm recording on right now, which is the Sony a7 IV, and the 24mm prime lens, which I don't remember where I left it. I feel like it's bigger than a lot of the setups people are gonna use. Oh, and I even decided to go rollerblading with it, go off the curb, and you know, I'm pushing as well, so you get that. And I'm holding it with one hand because I was holding my A6700, so I wasn't being super stable. Typically, sometimes I do use a combination of rollerblades and a gimbal when I wanna get super epic footage. In this test, I wasn't doing that. I was just trying to see how it would look going down the curb and skating around a little bit. Footage looked pretty darn good. And kind of going back to what I was saying about this gimbal filling a void in the market, every single year it seems like each brand seems to release a new gimbal. It's nice to finally kind of take a step back from all these new features, and just get something that people can afford that does everything that they need. And so that's what this really does. When I first got this sent to me, I didn't think I was gonna replace my RS3, but to be honest, like sometimes the RS3 does struggle. It still gets the job done. It's not like it completely freaks out, but it's just a little bit more sensitive, it seems like, to not balancing it perfectly well. This thing, on the other hand, was just a complete tank. So the RS3 is only having to balance the A6700. This guy, Cinepeer 3E, it's like a full frame camera with the 24-105 lens, so it's like a much bigger, heavier setup, and it's doing a way better job. That one's been shaking and trembling sometimes. The fact that this one is outperforming one that costs twice as much is pretty impressive. I didn't think this was gonna be the case, but I'm actually gonna keep this one, and I think I'm gonna sell my RS3. Obviously, this is missing some of those little convenient things, and I am gonna miss those, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is how well it balances and not having to like worry about balancing it so perfect on your end and worrying about whether you have too heavy of a setup. At the end of the day, it does the main job of a gimbal, and it does it a little bit better with more battery time and less time to charge, and it's overall lighter weight. And it costs less. As for who should buy it, if you just want a gimbal that actually does what a gimbal's supposed to do, you don't really need all that extra stuff, this is really the gimbal for you. That's why you test stuff, because sometimes the underdog wins, and in this case, I mean, it won. I'm legitimately gonna sell my RS3, and I wasn't planning on doing that. And with all that being said, I just want to thank you guys so much for watching till the end of the video. If you're still here, I really appreciate you. And if you got anything out of it, definitely hit the like button. Super simple thing you can do, takes about 1 second, but makes a huge difference for my channel. So I would appreciate that as well. And if you like this kind of content, anything that has to do with camera gear, camera lenses, reviews, camera backpacks, anything like that, definitely subscribe. I'm gonna be putting out a lot more videos in the future, plus I already have a pretty good amount of good videos on my channel. Thank you so much again for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. This is gimbal inception. Using a gimbal to record me using a gimbal.